Being alone can become a sanctuary where your soul finally exhales. It may sound radical, even unsettling, especially if you were taught that love from another is the ultimate cure, that solitude signals failure, and that healing must arrive hand in hand with someone else's presence. But Carl Jung pointed us towards something far more profound. There are wounds too sacred for noise, too ancient for words. They mend only in the stillness. There are strengths that arise not in performance, but in quiet, when no one is watching. And there are pieces of your true self that cannot surface while you are still reaching, still pleasing, still chasing validation outside of you. In this space of conscious solitude, something shifts. You do not fall apart. You begin to return to the parts of you that were waiting to be met without distraction. This video will walk you into that space. It will reveal why solitude, when chosen with intention, is not loneliness, but liberation. It dissolves the masks. It calls forth the shadow. It awakens the soft voice of intuition. 3 sacred steps in Jung's path of individuation. And by the end, you may realize you were never meant to be rescued. You were meant to remember. So if your heart feels heavy, or your silence feels sharp, stay with me. There is something in you that is not broken, only buried. Together, we'll uncover how solitude becomes the soil where wholeness takes root. And, if you're seeking true emotional depth, healing and psychological transformation, you're in the right place. From the earliest moments of life, many are shaped to believe that being alone is a flaw to be corrected. A quiet child is quickly labeled as withdrawn. A single adult is often viewed as unfinished. In a world that equates noise with life, silence becomes something to flee. We fill it with distractions, endless conversations, background noise, anything to avoid that sacred moment when the outer world dims and the inner voice begins to speak. But Carl Jung saw through this illusion. He knew that wholeness is not something we find in others. It is something we awaken within ourselves. Yet modern conditioning teaches us to build our identity on mirrors, to seek love as a form of validation, to construct a pleasing persona, and to fear rejection more than we fear forgetting who we are. Over time, this creates a false bond where connection becomes dependence and solitude feels unbearable. But solitude only hurts because it strips away the performance. The pain that rises when you sit alone is not born from the present, it is memory. It is the echo of childhood wounds, the imprint of past abandonments, the ache of unspoken griefs that were buried so deeply they only rise when the world goes quiet. The ego trembles in that silence because it has always needed attention to feel real. It has lived through applause, approval, and presence. But the soul is not frightened by silence. It remembers that stillness is sacred. Solitude, in Jung's view, is not exile, it is initiation. When the noise is gone and the masks fall, what emerges is not a void, but the forgotten language of your own inner world. This is where the unconscious rises to be met, where the deeper work begins and where true healing takes root. Being alone is not easy. In a world addicted to movement and stimulation, stillness can feel like a threat. Solitude strips away the external world and leads you inward, where your feelings no longer have anywhere to hide. For many, this confrontation feels foreign and overwhelming. We are often taught to react instead of feel, to perform instead of process. But this is exactly where the alchemy of healing begins. The unease you feel in silence is not punishment. It is an invitation. Carl Jung called this the beginning of individuation, the sacred journey of returning to your essence. In that stillness, you begin to see not what others expected of you, but who you've always been beneath the noise. And at first, what you meet there may feel like emptiness, a hollow space. But do not fear that void. It is not lifeless. It is the pause before rebirth. It is the moment your soul inhales again, after years of holding its breath beneath layers of expectation. And it does not rush to fill the silence. It moves slowly, quietly, patiently, because it knows this is holy ground. Jung believed that the real self does not emerge through applause or attention. It arises when you choose to step back from the crowd and into the cave of your own being. That cave may look like discomfort, but it is your place of transformation. This kind of withdrawal is not an escape, it is an act of courage. It is you standing at the threshold and whispering to the unconscious, I am ready, ready to feel, ready to see, ready to heal. And in that moment, the persona begins to dissolve. The performance ends, the spotlight dims. What remains is real. And what is real is not loud or dramatic. It is profound, subtle, and enduring. Stillness is not absence. It is the soul preparing to speak, and when it does, it will not shout. It will whisper truths you had long forgotten, but deeply needed to remember. At first, this moment of solitude can feel disorienting. You may not even recognize the person staring back at you without the routines that shaped your days, the roles that once defined your worth, or the relationships that reflected your identity back to you. But this unfamiliarity is not a mistake. It is a threshold, the beginning of something ancient and deeply sacred. The truth is, your authentic self has always lived beneath the surface, waiting patiently for your attention. And when life finally slows down, when the noise fades and no one else is looking, the real work begins. Not the work of becoming, but of remembering. The self does not emerge through effort, but through space. And that space is created when you choose to step back from the external world and turn inward. This is not a step backward. It is a step into the very center of your being. And what feels at first like emptiness is actually presence. The presence of the soul rising through the stillness. Jung taught that this emergence begins with the cracking of the persona. The persona is the social mask we wear to navigate life. The agreeable one, the responsible one, the successful one. It is not false, but it is incomplete. It helps us survive, but it does not help us become whole. In silence, that mask begins to loosen. You start to notice how many of your thoughts, reactions, and behaviors were rehearsed responses, shaped to gain acceptance or avoid rejection. And when there is no one left to impress, that performance begins to dissolve. What remains can feel raw, uncertain, even vulnerable. But it is also real. You begin to see who you are without the layers, without the editing, without the armor. Jung believed that the soul begins its ascent not through the world's applause, but through the inward gaze. That's why solitude, though difficult, is holy, because when the persona fades, the true self begins to speak. not in shouts, but in whispers. Whispers that remind you of what you've forgotten, of who you were before the world told you who to be. And though that voice may tremble at first, it is sacred. It is you, and it has been waiting, not for the world to see it, but for you to finally come home. At this stage of the inward path, emotions long buried may begin to rise. Grief, frustration, even a primal fear that has no name. Do not mistake this for failure. This is not a collapse. It is a sacred unraveling. For years, the persona protected you like armor, shielding the world from your hidden wounds. As that mask begins to dissolve, the raw truths buried beneath it are finally allowed to breathe. What you feel now is not weakness. It is the opening of an old room in your soul, one that has waited patiently for you to return, with the strength to witness what lives inside. These feelings are not emerging to harm you. They are surfacing so they can be healed. In solitude, a mirror is held up, not the one others reflect back to you, but the deeper mirror of the unconscious. It shows you what you've avoided. In Jungian psychology, this is known as the shadow, the container for every piece of yourself that was once deemed too much, too sensitive, too broken to be accepted. The shadow holds pain, yes, but also vitality. It stores the rejected, not because you were incapable of facing it, but because the world around you never gave you permission to feel it fully. And now, in silence, it begins to speak. Memories return, some sharp, others vague. A sorrow you cannot name, a frustration with no clear source, a loneliness that lingers even when you are not alone. This is the moment where many retreat, running back to busyness, comfort, and noise. But if you remain still, if you choose to listen instead of escape, you will hear something deeper beneath the ache, the voice of your unclaimed power. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That is what is happening now. You are not being broken, you are being reshaped. It will not be easy. There will be moments you question your strength, moments where you feel lost inside yourself. But this is not the end. This is the sacred middle, the dark night before the rising dawn. This is the moment your soul decides whether to repeat or to rise. And if you stay, if you meet your shadow instead of fleeing from it, you will not be consumed, you will be transformed. Because hidden behind the very pain you feared lies the blueprint of your awakening. And when your body finally senses safety, not as a performance, but as truth, it softens. Its defenses, once raised like armor against invisible battles, begin to fall. The breath deepens. The heart no longer beats in anticipation of a threat. And in that subtle stillness, something long buried begins to emerge. Not as noise, not as demand, but as a quiet pulse from the soul itself. It is not loud. It does not shout. It feels more like a sacred whisper, echoing gently from a place beyond thought. This is intuition, a knowing that arrives without reason, yet carries the weight of truth. It does not beg to be heard. It does not compete with the outer world. Instead, it waits for one thing, your willingness to listen. When life slows down, when the search for approval quiets, and when you are no longer seeking answers in someone else's eyes, you begin to feel a knowing that cannot be taught. Jung understood this as one of the 4 pillars of the psyche. Intuition as the soul's silent messenger. It is not bound by logic. It does not rise through calculation. It is an inner compass attuned to meaning beyond the visible, and it only reveals itself in the presence of inner silence. In this grounded solitude, the fog begins to lift. What once felt uncertain starts to clarify, not through explanation, but through resonance. You begin to notice small inner signals, a tightening when something no longer aligns, a subtle peace when something true emerges. The body reacts first, the soul confirms, and gradually you stop needing so much evidence. You stop needing so many signs, because you begin to feel what is right, before you can even articulate why. This is not wishful thinking, it is alignment. A synchrony between the psyche and the soul. You are no longer guided by noise, nor ruled by fear. You are moved by something deeper, and that movement, however gentle, becomes direction. This is the quiet power of conscious solitude. It doesn't just silence distraction, it reveals the inner voice that has always known your way, and once you feel its clarity, you realize peace was never outside of you. It was always the echo of your own truth, waiting to be heard. When the soul begins to feel safe, the body listens. For the body too has endured the weight of survival. It has flinched in silence, braced for rejection, tightened at the sound of criticism, and prepared for absence long before it arrived. The muscles learned to harden before the heart could break. The breath learned to shorten before the pain could surface. And all of it, silently, was stored deep within. Most people do not realize how long they've lived on edge, expecting disruption, guarding against hurt, always tensed as if life were a storm waiting to strike. But solitude, when chosen not as exile but as a sanctuary, sends a new message to the body. You are no longer at war. In this quiet space, the nervous system begins to soften, the breath becomes fuller, the heartbeat is steadier, not because life is perfect, but because the soul no longer treats the present moment as a threat. Carl Jung once said, "The unconscious is not confined to the mind, it lives in the body." Every emotion you buried didn't vanish, it found a home in your shoulders, your jaw, and your chest. Every unspoken grief became a knot. Every unexpressed fear became fatigue. This is why healing is not only psychological, it is physiological. You cannot think your way out of pain, you must feel your way through it. As safety takes root, the body begins to unlearn its defenses. The impulse to explain, defend, or justify slowly fades. The urge to prove worth dissolves. The present becomes not a battlefield, but a resting place. This shift is not dramatic. It is tender, gradual, but its impact is profound. Your body, once ruled by anticipation and alertness, starts to flow in rhythm with your inner truth. This is the reunion, mind, body, and soul finally walking in harmony. A peace arises that asks nothing from others. A strength unfolds that is not loud, but deeply rooted. You no longer mistake tension for control. You no longer see softness as weakness. You come to understand that protection is not found in defense but in grounded presence. Solitude, once a symbol of lack, becomes a sanctuary of completeness, and in this quiet alignment, you return to yourself, not as someone trying to survive, but as someone who is finally free to live. And when your body finally senses safety, not as a performance, but as truth, it softens. Its defenses, once raised like armor against invisible battles, begin to fall. The breath deepens. The heart no longer beats in anticipation of a threat. And in that subtle stillness, something long buried begins to emerge. Not as noise, not as demand, but as a quiet pulse from the soul itself. It is not loud. It does not shout. It feels more like a sacred whisper, echoing gently from a place beyond thought. This is intuition, a knowing that arrives without reason, yet carries the weight of truth. It does not beg to be heard. It does not compete with the outer world. Instead, it waits for one thing: your willingness to listen. When life slows down, when the search for approval quiets, and when you are no longer seeking answers in someone else's eyes, you begin to feel a knowing that cannot be taught. Jung understood this as one of the 4 pillars of the psyche. Intuition as the soul's silent messenger. It is not bound by logic. It does not rise through calculation. It is an inner compass attuned to meaning beyond the visible, and it only reveals itself in the presence of inner silence. In this grounded solitude, the fog begins to lift. What once felt uncertain starts to clarify, not through explanation, but through resonance. You begin to notice small inner signals, a tightening when something no longer aligns, a subtle peace when something true emerges. The body reacts first, the soul confirms, and gradually you stop needing so much evidence. You stop needing so many signs, because you begin to feel what is right, before you can even articulate why. This is not wishful thinking. It is alignment. A synchrony between the psyche and the soul. You are no longer guided by noise, nor ruled by fear. You are moved by something deeper. And that movement, however gentle, becomes direction. This is the quiet power of conscious solitude. It doesn't just silence distraction, it reveals the inner voice that has always known your way. And once you feel its clarity, you realize peace was never outside of you. It was always the echo of your own truth, waiting to be heard. There comes a moment in solitude when the noise fades and something remarkable begins to rise, not from the world around you, but from the world within. It is subtle at first, a quiet sensation, like catching a glimpse of someone familiar in a dream. But as you sit more deeply in yourself, you begin to recognize this presence. It is not someone else. It is not a partner or a missing piece. It is your future self. And not the polished image you've tried to chase. Not some idealized version sculpted by perfectionism, but the essence of who you were always meant to become. In Jungian psychology, this is the self, the symbol of totality, the central archetype of inner wholeness. The future self is not a distant finish line. It is the living reflection of your deepest alignment. It does not pull you forward with pressure. It walks beside you in silence. As your intuition awakens, your inner compass begins to point not outward for direction, but inward for resonance. The searching slows. You stop needing answers to feel safe. You stop waiting for signs to believe in your path. A gentle clarity takes root, and from that stillness, you begin to live differently. Not by force, but by frequency. The more connected you feel to this deeper presence within, the more your choices reflect it. You begin to say no without guilt. You hold your boundaries with grace. You stop justifying your needs or over-explaining your silence. You no longer shrink to be accepted or expand to be noticed. Your energy no longer reacts to the world, it begins to shape it. This is the quiet power of integration. You stop looking for love to fill a void. You begin to embody the love that wholeness brings. And in doing so, you naturally attract people, places, and paths that resonate with your true vibration. Not as compensation for your wounds, but as reflections of your healing. You stop trying to belong everywhere and start realizing where you naturally fit. There is no need to prove yourself. Your presence becomes your message. The noise loses its grip. Old patterns lose their hold, not because you changed to please anyone, but because you stopped betraying who you truly are. This is not pride, it is spiritual integrity. You are not hardening, you are anchoring. You do not need applause. You have resonance, and that inner alignment becomes the magnetic field of your life. When your inner world transforms, the outer world begins to echo it, not by force, but by reflection. You are no longer dreaming of someone else. You are finally meeting yourself. This is the quiet alchemy of conscious solitude. It does not simply change how you feel on the inside. It subtly reshapes how the world meets you. You begin to realize that when you feel whole within, you no longer chase spaces to belong. Your presence no longer asks, it radiates, and what flows out begins to return in kind. As your energy becomes more balanced, your definition of love begins to shift as well. It no longer resembles a place of self-abandonment. Instead, it becomes a sacred exchange rooted in freedom. You stop seeking love to complete you. You become so complete within yourself that you can love without fear of losing your center. Solitude, when chosen with intention, teaches this profound lesson, that you are already enough without attaching your wholeness to another. That peace does not depend on who stays or leaves. That real love blooms only when you are no longer asking to be rescued by it. Carl Jung once observed that no true union can arise from dependency. When two souls meet from a place of centeredness, love becomes a shared path, not a prison. It does not demand compromise at the cost of your truth. It does not silence you to keep the peace. And once you've touched this level of wholeness, you begin to see the past with new eyes. The quiet sacrifices you once made in the name of love now feel foreign. Because when you are whole, your heart can no longer accept what once wounded it. This doesn't mean you're hardening. It means you love with honesty and presence. You love without losing yourself. You no longer wait to be noticed or twist your truth to be accepted. You show up whole, and you stay only where that wholeness is honored. This kind of love does not control or cling. It flows. And when it meets someone equally rooted, it creates a rare harmony. Two complete beings walking side by side, neither needing to shrink to make room for the other. This is what solitude prepares you for. A heart that knows how to hold love without being consumed by it. A soul that welcomes connection without depending on it for survival. Love, when it finally arrives, does not come searching for broken halves to mend. It finds someone who has already chosen to stay, through every season, with themselves. Now that you've witnessed the healing that conscious solitude offers, a new question arises. How do you protect this state in daily life? The answer is presence. And presence begins with a simple act of remembrance. A return to the peaceful self already alive within you. Jung called this practice active imagination, a living dialogue between your conscious mind and your unconscious depths. Unlike surface affirmations, this ritual connects you to the symbolic language of your soul. Here is how you begin. Find a quiet space. Breathe deeply. Repeat within. I am here. Not as a phrase, but as a reconnection. Then allow an image to rise, a version of you who already lives in peace. Let it move, speak, breathe. Ask, what did I release to become this? What must I still understand? Receive the response in silence. Then close with, I see you, and I walk toward you. This is not fantasy, it is integration. It draws you back to yourself. It builds the bond between who you were and who you are becoming. You are not empty. You are full of strength, of truth, of everything once silenced in the name of relationships that did not see you. This path of solitude did not leave you lost. It returned you to yourself. And now, you no longer need to chase to feel whole. You no longer mistake aloneness for failure. That ache was never abandonment. It was the first call home. Jung once said, the most important encounters in life are the ones we have with ourselves. This may be the most powerful one yet. What emerged from this was not coldness, it was clarity. What was born was not isolation, it was integrity. You now carry a peace that does not require explanation, a quiet power that no longer fits into chaos. And if love finds you, and it very well may, it will not be rescuing barren land. It will find rich, rooted ground. So ask yourself, what changed within you on this journey? What did solitude teach you about presence? If you're still here, leave a comment. My presence is enough. If this message stirred something inside you, don't stop here. The next video will take you even deeper into the journey of healing, growth, and self-discovery. It might just be the breakthrough your soul has been waiting for. Tap into it now. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join a community committed to truth, transformation, and real inner change. You're not alone on this path. I'll meet you in the next video, where we continue becoming who we were always meant to be.